Greetings to the organizers and participants of the conference. Because of Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, people in Ukraine are facing prolonged blackouts, along with disruptions to heating, water, and internet access. That's why I decided to record this talk. My talk today is entitled The Autoethnography of Translation Towards a Typology. I'm addressing a practical issue many of us face when we write about translation and interpreting from our own experience. Across translation studies, we use first-person materials constantly: diaries, reflective commentaries, process reports, field notes, practitioner narratives, and activist accounts. They can be compelling, but they are methodologically inconsistent. Similar practices are described with different labels: reflection, diary, memoir, practitioner perspective, autoethnography, and some studies do not state clearly what the method is, what counts as data, or how the material was analyzed. I propose a way to conceptualize what I call the autoethnography of translation: first-person research that treats translational experience and practice as evidence and makes its reasoning explicit. I treat it as a flexible methodological space organized along three axes: first, form and function; second, embodiment and performance; and third, number of voices and collaboration format. I'll proceed in three steps. First, why this matters in translator studies. Second, why the analytic evocative debate is useful but insufficient. And third, how the three-axis typology works through three brief case studies. First, why this matters now. Over the past 2 decades, translation studies has increasingly highlighted translators as situated, socially embedded, and having agency, often discussed as the translator turn. As a result, first-person materials have become central sources of insight. The problem is not that first-person work is too subjective. The problem is that we often do not tell readers how to assess it methodologically. If I include a diary from a translation project, is it a pedagogical tool, a data source, an illustration, or core evidence? If I describe an ethical dilemma in interpreting, am I making an analytical claim or offering a narrative that seeks resonance? Without shared descriptors, reviewers struggle to judge what counts as evidence and what standards of rigor apply. Without clear positioning, it is harder to compare studies across subfields and contexts, and harder to build cumulative knowledge about translator-mediated subjectivity and agency. So my contribution is a practical grid that helps authors position first-person research explicitly and helps readers and reviewers compare different kinds of work more fairly. In other words, it helps us say what we are doing when we use our own practice as evidence. Second, the analytic evocative debate and why it is not enough. In autoethnography, a classic distinction is analytic versus evocative. Analytic work treats experience as data that is examined and tied to theory. Evocative work foregrounds narrative, affect, and ethical resonance. This distinction between analytic and evocative is useful, but translation and interpreting are mediated practices. Translators act through others' words, under briefs, norms, deadlines, institutions, and technologies. In this setting, the researching I is relational and role-based. Three features make the binary insufficient. First, translator accounts often blend analysis and narration. An episode is told and immediately interpreted through norms, constraints, and ethics. Second, the data is usually records of practice: drafts, revisions, logs, decision reports, emails, rather than inner experience alone. Third, translation is frequently collaborative, so even single-authored accounts embed multiple voices: authors, editors, clients, audiences, co-translators, and tools. So instead of relying on one opposition, I propose a typology that captures three recurring dimensions of variation. First, form and function. Second, embodiment. And third, collaboration. Together, they build a shared methodological space. The three-axis typology. Axis 1, form and function. On the first axis, I treat translation autoethnography as a menu of recurring forms. Each form has a dominant function that shapes what counts as evidence and what claims are plausible. I outline 5 forms. First, analytic self-case studies of practice. One project or decision problem analyzed through drafts, revisions, and commentary. Second, process documentation and diaries, journals and structured decision reports that show change over time. Third, narrative accounts of professional and ethical experience, that is, episodes of conflict, responsibility, uncertainty, and effect tied to explanation of choices. Fourth, activist and politically situated autoethnographies, experience narrated and analyzed as part of collective action. And finally, meta-autoethnographic reflections, work that reflects on method, evidence, and evaluation. Now let's move on to axes 2 and 3. The second axis asks how centrally a study attends to embodied and performative dimensions of translation and interpreting. Interpreting makes embodiment visible. Voice, breath, rhythm, fatigue, emotional regulation. But translation is embodied too, through sustained routines and tool use. The third axis foregrounds the fact that translation is rarely solitary. Individual accounts, duoethnography, two-person dialogic accounts, collaborative autoethnography, and community or collective accounts linked to shared practice. Combined, the axes form a usable grid. A study can position itself by answering 3 questions. What is the dominant form and function? How central is embodiment and performance? And how many voices structure the account? This helps reviewers see what was recorded and how claims are supported, and it helps authors write a short positioning paragraph so readers know what kind of first-person research they are reading. To make this tangible, I'll position 3 studies using the grid. Let's consider the first case, the article by Claudine Borg in Translation Spaces, published in 2024, titled Revising a Literary Translation for Publication, Insights from an Autoethnographic Study, is an analytic self-case study. Revision is examined via drafts and retrospective commentary and linked to editorial interaction and professional norms. The second case study, the article by Tanya Voinova in Multilingua, also published in 2024 and entitled Who Are You Standing With? Cultural Self-Retranslation of a Russian-Speaking Conference Immigrant Interpreter in Israel During the War in Ukraine, is a narrative and politically situated autoethnography. Embodiment and performance are central because interpreting is presented as real-time work under moral pressure. Let's move on to the third case, the article by Victoria Haldane and colleagues in BMJ Global Health, published in 2022 and entitled Exploring the Translation Process for Multilingual Implementation Research Studies, a Collaborative Autoethnography, is explicitly collaborative. Multiple translators and researchers reflect together, showing how choices emerge through group discussion and institutional requirements. These cases show what the grid does. It locates different publications within the shared methodological space of autoethnography. What is this typology for? This framework does three things for translator studies. It increases reflection on method by prompting authors to state how first-person experience is being used. It improves comparison by distinguishing different types of autoethnography, and it clarifies what first-person materials can credibly support in arguments about translator-mediated subjectivity, professional knowledge, and translational agency, by making visible mediating factors such as texts, bodies, technologies, and collaboration. If you are a junior scholar planning to use your own experience as evidence, my practical suggestion is this. In the methods section, or even in the introduction, position your work on these three axes. Name the dominant form, specify what your data is, say whether embodiment is central, and state whether the account is individual or collaborative. This makes your argument easier to follow, your evidence easier to assess, and your contribution easier to build on. In conclusion, translation studies already produces a great deal of autoethnographic knowledge without necessarily calling it that. My proposal is to recognize that diversity and give it a shared conceptual structure, a three-axis typology of form and function, embodiment and performance, and number of voices and collaboration. Thank you for your attention.